Welcome back, CATIA class. Today we're going to go over the L extrusion, and this assignment is in your textbook. So if you go to the syllabus, you can follow along in your textbook, or you can just go ahead and follow this YouTube video, or both. So this assignment starts in chapter 3, and we're going to sketch this L extrusion, and it starts in chapter 3.11 and it ends at 3.42. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have CATIA open, and again, chances are CATIA will not take you to the correct workbench when you first open up CATIA. So I'm going to go ahead and close this file. I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of CATIA. You can maximize here, or you can just simply double click on the top here. Alright, so let's go to Start, Mechanical Design, and Part Design. I'm going to go ahead and call this L extrusion. And OK. And you can see it gave the name listed the name at the top of the tree. Let's go ahead and maximize this. Okay, one of the things the textbook walks you through is adding your favorite toolbars. Again, the CATIA, I mentioned this before, has over 100 workbenches or modules. So I'm going to go over to the toolbars, right click on any icon, go all the way down. And I meant to say I'm going to add my favorite workbenches. Okay, so I'm going to go to Customize. And you go to Start Menu tab. And over here on the right hand side, I'm going to populate my favorite workbenches. Here are just some of the workbenches. And it doesn't have all 100. You would actually have to pay extra to gain access to the other workbenches. Okay, so the ones I'm going to populate over: assembly, right? This is when we're creating products, just like assembling a bicycle. Part design, designing single parts, and move it over. And I'm also going to move over the drafting. And you don't have to do the fourth one. I use a lot of surfacing at work, so I use drafting, part design, assembly, and generative shape design surfacing. So those are my 4 favorite workbenches. And I place them over here on the right so that I can easily access them without having to go to the Start and drop down. Okay, so I'm done setting up my favorites. I'm going to close it. And now when I click on the gear for part design workbench, when I click on it, notice it gives me my favorite workbenches. So I can go to assembly, I can go to drafting, I can go to generative shape design surfacing without having to go to the Start drop down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. You can go the long way, right? You can go part design, assembly, drafting. Or you can see here it also lists your 4 or 3 favorite workbenches, right? So it does add it to the list here. Or you can just simply click on the workbench to access your favorite workbenches or modules. Alright, so before we get started, we're going to change the grid in Sketcher. Okay, so we're going to go to Tools, Options. You don't have to do this part. So we're going to change the grid and also change the units from millimeters to inches. So let's first change the units. So I'm going to go to Options. Click on the plus sign on General. Go to Parameters and Measure. Go to the Units tab. And we're going to change this from millimeters to inches. Mine's already set to inches. Okay, go to the drop down, select the units. Okay, so I'm already set to inches. Alright, so now I'm going to go over to the Sketcher settings. Okay, so I'm going to go to and look for Sketcher. Let me open Mechanical Design. I think it's in here. Yep, there it is. Sketcher. So hit the plus sign on Mechanical Design. You can change settings on these workbenches. I'm going to change it on Sketcher. And by the way, your textbook walks you through this. Alright, so notice I currently have my grid option to display when I go into Sketcher, and when we go into Sketcher you will see the grid show up in the background. And I'm going to do spacing of 1 inch as suggested by the textbook. So 1 inch for my horizontal, and it'll also change my vertical to 1 inch, and I'm going to have divisions of 10. So every 0.1 inch it's going to put a vertical or horizontal line. Alright, so now that we're set, we can go ahead and go to OK. Okay, so now I'm going to go into Sketcher. And we're going to pick a plane. Let me see what plane is suggested here by your textbook. So we're going to use the ZX plane, okay, to sketch on. So I'll just follow the textbook. Okay, so I'm going to create a sketch on the ZX plane. Okay, and there we have it. Alright, so let's go back. And I'm not going to go detailed, step by step following the textbook. I'm going to skip a lot of it. You can, again, follow along. The book does a really good job of walking you step by step. I'm just going to quickly go through it on this YouTube video. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is create a point. With respect to the origin, it'll be 1 inch to the right and 1 inch vertically. So 1 inch horizontally, 1 inch vertically. So here you can see the horizontal is 1 inch and the vertical is 1 inch. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the point command to create a point, and that's where we're going to start our L extrusion. Okay, so let's go ahead and use the point command. So here's the point command. And I'm going to zoom in slightly. I'm going to hit the magnifying glass so you can see the grid in the background. And I'm going to turn on snap. Most likely yours is turned on, so it'll snap to the grid. So notice every square represents 1 inch. So that's 1 inch by 1 inch. And then you have your graduations in between, right, at 0.1. So this is 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, and so on, all the way up to 1. So every square is 1 inch by 1 inch with 10-inch graduations. Okay, so we're going to locate our point at 1, 1. If you want, you can actually type it in. You can say 1, tab on the keyboard, 1, and enter. And it'll locate it for you at 1 by 1, right? Or you can simply click to locate it and then add your dimensions. So here it automatically generated my dimensions for me. So let me do that one more time. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo, Control Z on the keyboard, or you can just always hit the left pointing arrow to undo. So I'm going to do it one more time. Point. And I can actually just click to locate it, or I can click inside the box, type in 1 inch, tab 1, and enter. Okay, so it automatically locates that point for me. Now, one thing is, when we created this point, it created the point as a solid point. We want to turn it into a construction point. So first I'm going to click in space to deselect anything that I may have selected by accident. So I'm going to click on the point. Notice it's orange. And we're going to open up the tree, hitting the plus signs. Notice it's selecting our first point. The offsets are the 1-inch dimensions. Okay, so I'm going to take this point and turn it into a construction point. Notice it's no longer showing as a crosshair, but as a dot. And I know it's hard to see sometimes, but there it is, the dot representing our point. Okay, to deselect, either hit escape on the keyboard or click in space to deselect. All right, so we're going to start our L extrusion using this as our starting point. So I'm going to pan. I'm going to hold the wheel to pan. Hold the wheel to pan. You can zoom in and out using the magnifying glass if you like. All right, so let me zoom in a little bit more. So we're going to start off by creating these two lines using that reference point we just created. Okay, so we're going to create our first line. It's going to be a 1-inch length. So using coordinates, this line is located at 1, 1. That's where our point is located at 1, 1. And our second endpoint is located at 1, 2. Okay, so these are our horizontal and vertical coordinates. Okay, so we're going to use the line command. Notice I'm still in construction mode. Let's say I forgot that I'm in construction mode here, that I have it on. So I'm going to go ahead and create the line and just act like I didn't see this. Construction mode. Okay, so I'm going to create a line. And our starting point is at 1, 1. Okay, so there's 1, 1. So you can see it up here. You can either type in 1, 1 for our starting point, or you can just simply click where our point is. Notice that it's creating a construction line. We don't want a construction line. Construction lines, think of them as scaffolding. It's just geometry to help you create your profile for your sketch. So I'm going to turn this off. Notice now it's a solid. Okay, so now we're going to go all the way up to 2. Notice here it'll say 1, 2. I'm going to click. Okay, so once again, this is at 1, 1, 1, 2. You can always double click on the line to verify. Double click. I want you to notice that our first point is at 1, 1. So 1 to the right, 1 up. And our second endpoint is at 1. Actually, I'm saying it in the wrong order. Actually, no, I was right. So 1, 2 is the second endpoint, 1 to the right, and 2 up, 1, 2. So again, our squares are 1 inch by 1 inch squares. You can always change it here if you like. The first one is grayed out because it got locked to our reference point that we created earlier. But the second one, we can always change it. And okay. So just to show you, we can always change this second endpoint. The first one's locked in place. But see, this endpoint is gray, meaning we can actually move it. And we want it here at 1, 2. Again, double click. You can always change it if you like. Here I typed in 2, 2, which actually I don't want, but let me hit OK just to show you. It doesn't give it to me because it's fighting the vertical constraint. So it didn't like the 2, 2. It would have gone off to the right, but I can decrease it or increase it. Let's go to 1, 3. See, it went to 1, 3. I'm panning by holding onto the wheel, so 1, 1, 2, 3. So again, every square is a 1 inch by 1 inch square. I'll just drop it back down, do 1, 2. Again, double click, and we can see it's at 1, 2. again. All right, so let's do our second line. Same thing. We're going to go from 1, 1 all the way to 2, 1. Okay, so draw our line. We'll start at 1, 1. So you can see up here, it'll read 1, 1. 1, 1, there it is, click. And then we can go to 2, 1. So with respect to the origin, goes 2 to the right, 1 up. Okay, so there's our starting. So our profile, we started it. Now we need to go ahead and give it some thickness. All right, so let me click out in space to deselect. Okay, so we got this done so far. So our goal is to create this L extrusion, so we need to create a close profile. All right, so I want you to notice that this has a thickness of 0.1. Okay, so we're going to give this L extrusion a thickness of 0.1. All right, so let me zoom in a bit. All right, so using profile, I'll start at the endpoint. Notice how the circle, the blue circle is filled, letting us know it's picking an endpoint or a midpoint. By the way, you can always right click on existing geometry and say, hey, I want to go to the midpoint, or I want to go to the nearest endpoint. So here we go. Click, and we're going to go 0.1. Notice up here it'll read 2 and 1.1. There it is, 2 and 1.1. It's giving me a length of 0.1 up here. So once again, I want a thickness of 0.1 for my L extrusion. And there we have it. So we're done. We can either hit escape on the keyboard or turn off profile command. And there we have it. Okay, and click in space to deselect. Okay, notice it's white. So the green lines, they're constrained, right? I cannot move it left to right, nor this one. It's being constrained by this point, which is locked by these coordinates, or these dimensions, I should say, 1 by 1. And it's also being locked as far as orientation. This is a horizontal. This is a vertical. Now, even though this is a vertical, it's been locked vertically. It hasn't been locked horizontally, as you can see. So we do need to add some dimensions. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a 1 inch. My mistake, 0.1 inch. Same thing with this one. This one's free to move. So we need to add a, well, my mistake, clicked on the wrong one. Dimension of 0.1. Now, these are also free to move. So this is supposed to be 1 inch in length. Same thing with this one. So let me click in space to deselect. Click on dimensional constraint. From the base to the top is 1 inch. Notice this one is free to move. We're also going to use 1 inch. Click in space to deselect. Click on the dimensional constraint. Click on the vertical. Click on the end. And change this to 1 inch. Enter. All right, so we have our basic profile, but now we need to add a few details. Let me zoom in. I'm going to hold on to the wheel to pan. All right, so if you're following your textbook, it will ask us to create a fillet. They call it corner with the radius of 0.125. All right, so I'm going to round this off. It's referred to as a fillet. It CATIA refers to it as a corner. So let's go to the command, and here it is, the corner command. So I'm going to click on corner. I'm going to click on the horizontal and the vertical. Horizontal, vertical. And then I have to click one more time to place it. So I'm just going to guesstimate. Let's say I overestimated the radius, and click, and it generates a radius for us. So if we go back, we're to use a 0.125 radius. .125. So just double click on the dimension and this window will pop up. We can type in our radius and hit OK. There's our radius. Alright, so now we're going to do a chamfer. Okay, so up here we have a chamfer of 45 degrees and 0.8 and 0.085 in length. So here's the 45 degrees, and here's the 0.085 in length. Okay, so let's go ahead and use the chamfer command. So below the corner, the fillet, we have chamfer. Select the chamfer. I'm going to select the vertical, then select the horizontal. Let me move this out of the way. So notice it's already given us a preview of the chamfer. So it's going to be a small chamfer, so I'm just going to guesstimate the location and click. And there it is. It chamfered the part for us. Now chamfers, let me zoom into this area. Typically the reason we chamfer an edge is to prevent damage. So there might be another part, a second part that this is going to bolt onto, for example, and you're trying to avoid having sharp corners that may end up scratching another part, or even maybe when you're handling a part, you're trying to avoid having sharp corners that can cut your hands as you're handling the part. So that's one reason for chamfers and fillets or round corners, is to avoid having sharp corners that can cause damage. Alright, so I'm going to change this chamfer. I'm going to grab the dimension line and just pull it outward. You don't have to do this part. But you can always grab the dimension line. It's the one with the arrowhead to move it around. Okay, so I'm going to double click on it and change it to 0.085 and OK. And let me pan a little bit. I'm looking for the angle. So you can see the angle is way out here. So I can grab the dimension line and bring it in. It's easy to lose your constraints. So if you can't find the constraint for some reason, look in the constraints branch. So I'm just going to roll the wheel. You can always open up the constraints, right? If you have trouble finding that angle, you can always go here, right? You can always double click here and change the angle. Now it did default to 45. If you needed to change the angle, you can always change it here. Most likely a 30 or 60 degree chamfer will be asked for. But most chamfers are about 45 degrees. Again, 30 and 60 degrees are also quite common. All right. So we have our chamfer. I'm going to do a zoom fit. Let me zoom in. I'm going to move this over. Hold the wheel to pan. Okay, so we're pretty much done with our sketch. So make sure there's nothing wrong with your sketch by doing a tool sketch analysis. Notice we have a closed profile made up of 8 curves. In our case, mostly lines and a fillet or an arc. Okay, so everything's closed. We're good. If it's not closed, you have to go in there and fix it. If it says open, you have to go in and close it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. Okay, so now that we're done, we can go ahead and exit the sketch. So here's exit. Exit the Sketcher workbench. Okay, so there's our sketch. Click and space to deselect. I'm going to close these up. All right, if you ever need to go back to the sketch and make changes, you can always double click here or double click here. Either one will take you back into Sketcher. And we can exit. All right, so we're going to do an extrusion. I believe it's a 12-inch extrusion. Now we can always fix it later. All right, so we're going to do an extrude or pad. Some softwares call it extrude. CATIA calls it pad. So we're going to do a pad of this sketch, and it'll go normal to the sketch. So it'll go normal to our plane that we selected for the sketch. That's the default. Okay, so click. And we're going to go, I believe it was 12 inches. Now I can always come back and hit and fix it and hit OK. And let me do a zoom fit. All right, so to rotate, you can actually grab the top of the robot or compass to rotate, as you can see. You can also click on the letters if you want to go normal to Z. Notice it gives me a top view, normal to X. It's hard to click. If I click on X and again, it'll do a 180. Y. If you click on Y again, it'll rotate it 180. Okay, you can also use this toolbar for orientation. Hey, I want an isometric view. I want a front view, back view, and so on. Or you can use the mouse. So to pan, hold on to the wheel to pan. To zoom in and out, you hold on to the wheel and just tap the right button and move the mouse up and down to zoom in and out. To rotate, you hold the wheel and the right button. So hold the wheel and the right button to rotate. To pan. Now, if you rotate with the part out here in space instead of the center, it's going to rotate about some imaginary point in the center. So if I hold the wheel and the right button, it's going to rotate about that imaginary point in the middle of your screen. Sometimes you'll lose the part, like, hey, where did my part go? So you can always click with the wheel. So click any point on the part with the wheel and it'll center it. Okay, so I'm going to just click on this corner here with the wheel. It'll center it. See that? So I'm going to hold on to the wheel, hold on to the right button, and now I can rotate again. As you can see, I can do a zoom fit. There it is. All right, so now let's go ahead and save this. Let me just double check, make sure I didn't miss anything. And we did skip some of the stuff that the book walks you through. Okay, so yes, it did ask us to create a 12-inch extrusion. All right, so now we can go ahead and save it. If you want to give it the same name the textbook tells you to give it, or give it your own name, I'm just going to call it L extrusion. All right, so to save, you can either click on the disk to save, or you can go File, Save, or Save As. Okay, so save. And I already have my Chapter 3 folder, so I'm going to just call it L extrusion. If you want to give it a different name or the same name as the textbook, go for it. If you just want to call it extrusion, I'm okay with that. All right, and you can go ahead and save it. Again, save it on a flash drive, on the desktop, or maybe you have Dropbox or somewhere else up on the cloud that you can save it in and easily access it. want you to notice it's going to save it with the extension .cat part. And save. Alright, so we will be using this part later on for another exercise. So make sure you do save your work. And we're going to come back to this part or something similar to this part and add hole patterns. We're going to be doing some mirroring, etc., some more chamfers. So make sure to save your part because it will be used again. And we're also going to then, after we add more features in another chapter, again, hole patterns, mirrors, chamfers, we're also going to create a drawing from this part. Alright, so see you in the next video. End of video.